All right, we are back for a breaking news episode of the Three Amigos podcast. Two out of three amigos here. Me and Anthony. We were getting ready to go to bed, and then the news just dropped that WWE has been sold to Saudi Arabia. Vince McMahon has stayed true to his reputation as being rotten to the core and choosing probably the worst possible outcome for selling the company for the fans. Um, this is not, 100% confirmed yet. It is like 80%, 90% by a lot of different people. And it would also make perfect sense because WWE has a working relationship with Saudi Arabia. They do the Crown Jewel events. That's where most recently Logan Paul and Roman Reigns had their match. They also have a really bad track record of human rights violations and just overall their opinions on what women should and shouldn't be allowed to do, which is a perfect partner for somebody like Vince McMahon to want to sell the company to. So yeah, this is just kind of be like a short reaction. We're gonna try to get an episode with all three of us. But I guess, between the two of us, I watch and pay attention to a decent amount of wrestling, and WWE when Vince left had started to get better, and the storylines were better, and the wrestling was better, and the pay-per-views were better, and everything was just headed in the right direction. And then late December it broke that Vince wanted to come back, and then like a couple days ago he said he was coming back, and then today he got voted in, and then today Stephanie McMahon resigned like 10 minutes after Vince got put back in
Damn, I
charge.
didn't know that.
And yeah, and then probably because she knew about this deal and she was like, I'm not gonna freaking stay around for this one. Can't curse anymore, otherwise YouTube won't recommend the video. So we're using freaking on the podcast now.
Hmm.
But yeah, and then in true, I don't know, cowardly fashion, this deal like gets, reported at a time when most people are probably asleep or were about to go to bed and like aren't checking their phones. And I'm sure we'll get more details, but the initial reaction is that this is devastating. I don't know how else to say it unless your name is Vince McMahon or you're one of the people that owns large amounts of WWE stock. Like if you own 2 shares of WWE, you're not gonna be buying a bigger house because of this news. But like if you own 100,000 shares, like yeah, you're gonna be doing okay after they announce what the sale was for. I can only imagine that they got way more money than anyone, like any other corporation like Disney or NBC would have offered. Um, I we didn't talk about this, Anthony, but I mentioned to Frankie recently that there's like pretty much a Saudi Arabia tax because the country is like so widely disliked. Cristiano Ronaldo, this really famous soccer player, just recently signed to play soccer for Saudi Arabia. And in order to get him, they had to pay him $200 million a year to join their soccer team. They
Damn.
also offered Tiger Woods $1 billion to join their golf league. That is how much money Saudi Arabia has. I was talking to Frankie the other day, and I was like, I was gonna send this in the chat, but I accidentally said this exact thing was gonna happen. Of like they were gonna sell it to Saudi Arabia. They're gonna take the company private, which basically means like it's not gonna be traded anymore. But the real value of taking a company from public to private, if you have a figure at the top as evil as Vince McMahon, is that you don't have to worry about reputation and shareholders and stock prices going down because of controversy. So if you take a company private, don't have to worry about investigations. I don't want to say that the person in charge can basically do whatever they want and like get away with it, but you don't really have to worry about ramifications of like, oh, like what's the Activision guy who got like kicked out because he was
Oh yeah, the scandal, right?
yeah, like Activision's publicly traded, so when bad stuff like that comes out, the first thing is like, well, I mean, obviously he had to go in general, but like the first thing is like, well, the person in charge is gonna have to go because like they're the figurehead. We can't have the stock price tanking because they're still affiliated with us. So you take the company private, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. And I didn't want to be right, but it just kind of felt like, given how much money Saudi Arabia has, long story short, if they want something, they can get it, unless you're Tiger Woods, who literally just says no. Like, it turned down $1 billion to go play golf. Tiger Woods is like 50. Like, yeah, I'm still
But
like,
I don't think like in Tiger Woods' case, does he necessarily need $1 billion? Like
who doesn't need $1 billion?
I'm sure he
Like, what
has
do
a
you?
couple by now, right? How long has he been golfing and been sponsored?
He definitely has more money like than you could ever need, but yeah,
Because I'm looking on, I found a random Twitter, not Twitter, wow, random Instagram page here about the sale update, and this
yeah.
was apparently from 2 days ago.
Hmm.
So I don't know if this is like still going to be slightly accurate or no longer valid, but it said WWE has hired JP Morgan to advise over the potential sale, which would take place by
Yeah.
mid 2023. Interested buyers include Comcast, Fox, Disney, Warner Bros. Discovery, Netflix, Amazon, Endeavor Group Holdings, and the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund.
Yeah.
First of all, Disney was never good. I mean, Disney and WWE don't see that happening.
I
Uh,
mean, like, I don't know. The only reason I could have maybe seen it happening is just because like they bought Star Wars and like they have the money to do it. And also they have a streaming service, so like it's like really valuable programming. Like, to people on the outside, like maybe wrestling is still kind of seen as like silly or goofy, or with like the carnival sort of thing.
mhm.
But as an entity, it's incredibly valuable. Just like the merchandise, the
Right.
superstars, they have like movies and TV shows, like not even just the weekly wrestling TV shows, but like they do reality shows, like YouTube, so all sorts of
Yeah.
social media stuff. Like, it's got such a strong brand recognition, even if you don't know like much about wrestling, or like you don't watch wrestling, you know who Stone Cold is. Like, you know
Yeah.
who The Rock is. Like, you hear the glass shattering, like you sent that meme, like you hear the glass shattering, like, oh shit, start looking around. Like, yeah, but it's funny, like Frank and I were talking, and like that list you just rattled off, like as soon as, like, if Saudi Arabia is on that list, like don't even bother bidding. Like, you're not gonna outbid them, especially if the guy who owns the company they're trying to buy already has a working relationship. Like, Vince signed like a 10-year like deal to do pay-per-view shows out in Saudi Arabia. And so as soon as their name was mentioned, I started to get real nervous. And I don't want to get into all of this now, but just like a brief, like some things that I think have a lot of people worried is mainly the way that Saudi Arabia treats women. And WWE has recently, over the last several years, like really been trying to push women's wrestling to be taken as seriously as men's.
Right.
And there have been like a couple of women's matches on the recent Saudi shows, but they didn't own the company. Like, it
Right.
was it was a negotiation of like, hey, the first couple of years we won't do women's stuff. We want to what, like, quote unquote, respect your culture, even though that is certainly not something that deserves respect. And then, like, year three, four, five, like we want to try getting a couple women's matches on there. And when there's nobody to check you, something tells me we might start seeing a lot less women's wrestling. Might go back to how it was in the early 2000s, where it just like nobody cared, like it wasn't taken seriously. We
Right.
might not see any women's wrestling. I honestly, I don't know, because Saudi Arabia is just such a screwed up country. Um, and I'm only saying
And
that because I'm in America and they hopefully can't get me all the way over here. But
and it sucks because I remember, was it the last Royal Rumble where I
mhm.
was watching it and I was like, yo, the women's Rumble was way better than the men's Rumble. And some of these wrestlers, they're very skilled and talented. I'm a big fan of Becky Lynch and I'm a big fan now of Bianca Belair. At
Mm,
first I wasn't really crazy about her. Then I see how her career has gone from the time I went back into it briefly and paid attention. I'm like, all right, Bianca got it. She's still kicking ass and everything. And now it's, this whole thing of like women empowerment, and it's great, but you give it to a company like, or not company, but a place like Saudi Arabia, it's like, well, now that's all kind of
yeah, they
potentially
don't really
gone.
believe in the whole like women empowerment thing. I think also one of the fears was like when Vince left, like the on-screen product of WWE got a lot better,
Hmm.
just more watchable and like more interesting. And the idea, and like Frank and I talked about this like briefly, just messaging each other, but like the idea is that the only reason Vince came back to the company was to sell it and then try to get back in charge of creative, which when he was in charge of creative, we stopped watching because it was really bad. Like he's just an old man who's not in touch with the industry anymore. He's not in touch with
Right.
current trends. Like, got like people behind the scenes like HBK and Triple H like really had to put like Road Dogg, like really had to push Vince McMahon into like Stephanie McMahon also like instrumental in pushing the women's division. That's not something, and like I don't know how much evidence you need of like past like early wrestling, or like that's not really something Vince cared about, like anything involving women's wrestling being taken seriously.
Right.
But also Vince has a whole thing about like only wanting guys who are just 6'8", like 300 pounds, and
Omas.
smaller guys. Yeah. I'm not thinking of anyone in particular. Also, address him as future undisputed WWE champion Omos, because I want you to start putting some respect on his name. I will not stand
Yeah.
for this Omos slander anymore. Yeah, there's just like from a creative standpoint, it's very worrisome because inevitably when Vince gets back in charge after this sale closes, um, product's gonna go back to sucking, and I'm gonna go back to not watching except for probably WrestleMania. Like typically, I was to the point where I was watching twice a year, Rumble, Mania. That was it. Like maybe a SummerSlam match here or there. But I guess to get back to just like the overall impact of this sale, I don't know how else to describe it as a fan other than like devastating. This is the worst possible outcome. Vince McMahon is such a bastard for doing this. He knows exactly what he's doing. He wasn't going to sell the companies to some other successful American businessman. And the only company I thought that could potentially compete in a bid was Amazon. But
Hmm.
or I don't know, Elon Musk wants to friggin' buy WWE. Like,
Or even like, because I don't know how the whole thing works, but NBC could have been a potential as well, because they already have the Peacock partnership with them, and all the pay-per-views are on Peacock. So you would think it'd be like a no-brainer to say, hey, we're just gonna buy them out and put their brands on whatever channel or whatever. You know what I mean? But I
yeah,
don't, I don't know the full logistics behind it. I have no idea.
I think it mostly just came down to the fact that like Saudi Arabia could outbid. Like it's hard to put into perspective how much more financial firepower that country has than a like country. Like they are operating as a nation when they do this stuff. Like it's not a company. Like a small, like I mean I don't want to say small, but like in comparison to the Saudi Arabian government, like NBC Universal is nothing. Like maybe Amazon, maybe they could have, but I think also it's like I don't know what the numbers are going to look like when things start getting revealed, but I can only assume that Saudi Arabia, much like they have to do with everything else they try to buy, overpaid by like a lot of money. Like if, it was being thrown around that like if Star Wars went for 4 billion and what was that company that makes Fallout? What's the one that Xbox bought?
But Bethesda,
Yeah, if Bethesda went for like what they go for like 7 billion or something, like 8
yeah, it
billion.
was almost 7 billion. I think it was like 6 point something billion.
Yeah, so people were talking about like maybe WWE could go for 10 just because they have like, like we were talking about earlier, like they have their hands in so many different
Mm-hmm.
industries. But like if a number comes out that Vince got like $20-30 billion for WWE, I'd be like, yeah, I believe it. Because like to them, they were gonna pay Tiger Woods 1 billion just on his own. Like that's one
Right.
person. Like they
You
were,
know,
yeah, they're just prepared to spend.
money is so fascinating to me because you and Frankie know as well as some people, or even better than other people, how terrible I am with money. But when it comes to like billions of dollars, like what Bezos has and all that kind of stuff,
Hmm.
you got to ask yourself, what am I going to do with that money? Like, I believe there is a thing of having too much of something, and like, it'll just drive me crazy of like, I have all this money, but I can't buy anything. Like,
Yeah. I mean, eventually you just like, and you just kind of run out of stuff that you really like need slash want.
right,
But yeah, this is crazy. It's really, really sad. I think that I don't want to say that this is like going to destroy the company, but we've also never seen anything like this because Vince has been the only one, well, for the last like 40 years. He's been the only one in charge of the company. So, now we're going to see what happens if an entirely different, country, Saudi prince has a whole different idea of what he wants to watch on TV. Just a quick note on the Saudi prince. I think it was during the first Saudi Arabian event. He didn't know Yokozuna died. So, and he wanted him to be in the Royal Rumble that they did in Saudi Arabia. So,
mm,
WWE just sent out, and I'm trying to be as respectful as I can, a guy that just looked like a fat, like, oh, that could be Yokozuna if the
right,
Saudi prince is sitting far enough away. Like, this guy, like, he's the reason that like Goldberg and Brock Lesnar would do the Saudi shows because he like is stuck in the 80s and 90s.
right.
And like also, I did want to mention this because I think this is really important. Sami Zayn, because of his religion, is not allowed in the country of Saudi Arabia. Despite like when they went this past year, and they did the pre-match press conference between Logan and Roman, and I think Jake Paul was there, and I think the Usos were there, or like Paul Heyman. And the Saudi crowd, the local Saudi crowd, were chanting for Sami Zayn. And like the first couple of shows, like they announced, like, yeah, Sammy's not going. And then it came out that, like, well, it's actually a combination of he's not going because he doesn't agree with a lot of what Saudi Arabia does. Also, he's not allowed in the country.
Right.
So,
Is that why
Sami
Roman had
Zayn
that
is,
joke where he was like, "That's why you ain't gonna see Sammy" or something like that?
yeah, yeah. And it was just really like a powerful moment because it was like, hey, the people that are watching WWE TV in Saudi Arabia, they're down with Sami Zayn. It's the screwed up Saudi government that just, has a really, really weird set of rules. But
Yeah.
Sami Zayn is currently part of the hottest like wrestling storyline in a long time. And now if the company's going to be owned by a group of people that don't even let him into their country, um, yeah, I mean, it to me, my initial reaction is like they're going to blow the whole thing up. Like they're just going to hit the reset button on everything, and because it's their company, they can literally do whatever they want. Um, And the only thing I'm a little confused about is that the TV contracts are not up yet for like SmackDown and Raw.
Hmm.
So I don't know how that works because I this is like such a unique, like when the only thing I can think back to is like when Steve Cohen bought the Mets, he also tried to buy the network that broadcast the Mets games, but the owners of the team would sell it to him. So I don't know if they're just like if it's gonna come out that like Saudi Arabia bought out like the USA Network, they bought out Fox, and they're like, we just own all of it right now. Or if those are like separate deals that they're gonna wait till they expire, and then they're gonna be like, okay, once they expire, we own the TV rights, but then they're gonna have to
Right.
negotiate. Like it's Saudi Arabia. You're gonna have to put the programs on American television. So that's the part that I'm not, but more details will come out in a few days. That's why we wanted to just do a quick one now and then have all three of us on when there's more information available.
Yeah, because I even wonder like what is the rules for like, if this gets finalized and the wrestler says, you know what, I don't want to be part of it, I'm going to resign. Like, I'm assuming if they're on a contract, they have to wait for the contract to expire probably. And at that point, if it's beyond when the deal is finalized, if they say, hey, you can't leave our contract, like you stuck with us for, however long, um, because that'll suck. But if there are people who can resign, assuming that's how the process would work, I would imagine they're going to be trying to go into New Japan or AEW or something like that. Is
Yeah, I
TNA still
wouldn't.
a thing?
Yeah, sort of. It's pretty small now, but yeah, that's a good point, man. I wouldn't be surprised. There were talks when Vince was like threatening to come back, which seems like it was ages ago now, but it was like literally all happened so fast. But there were talks then about people like potentially walking out, and now if this deal does, fully go through, I wouldn't be surprised if certain people. And this is like going right back to what I was just saying. I would honestly not be surprised if Sami Zayn left. Like, this is a very bizarre situation. I'm sure there will be people that stick around and they're like, well, let's give it a couple months, like let's give it a
Right,
little while. But I wouldn't be surprised if you see some of the women wrestlers leave because they're just like, basically whistling past the graveyard sort of thing, where it's like, I know that I'm probably not going to get pushed now that Saudi Arabia is in charge.
right,
Um, and like Saudi Arabia puts out like all of this state funded media about like how progressive they're trying to be, but like they still don't want women to be able to drive or show their faces, or there's just a whole bunch
right.
of like weird stuff that they still believe in. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all if certain people in the company are just like, I'm just gonna go.
And if
Like I don't
they,
want to deal with this.
if they go to these other companies like AEW, for example, hey, if it's more people who can beat up CM Punk, I'll start watching AEW. I never got a chance to get into AEW, which is crazy because I missed some really cool things that I've seen online. Like, I missed the beginning of it. I missed that whole match where Chris Jericho had the fans sing his song. Was that like a cruise or something like that they're on?
Yeah, and now
And
they pretty much do that every time it comes out.
so,
Um,
I missed those moments. I have no idea who Jade is other than for what I've seen on Instagram, and I think she's like the TBS champion.
yeah, she's like, it's like the intercontinental. It's like a mid card women's belt,
Oh,
basically.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, Jade Cargill. Yeah, AEW is awesome. This is probably going to drive a lot of. I think that's actually an interesting thing to bring up. This is probably going to drive a lot of people like you to watch AEW instead,
Yeah.
because AEW is actually good. But they have been struggling a little bit over the last several months, just like building an audience. Like they have a strong core of people who watch the show, and like TV ratings, I think in general are just kind of overrated because like most of us watch stuff after it's happened. Like very rarely are you watching something live on television these days. So
Right.
it's like pay attention to YouTube and Instagram stuff, and like you have to look at all sorts of metrics now. You can't just be like, oh, this did this many viewers when it was on. It's like nobody watches regular television anymore. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if like wrestlers from WWE leave and try to go to AEW, and I wouldn't be surprised if fans um leave and just watch literally anything else, or even worse, they watch nothing and they just have this thing that they loved taken away because it's going to be owned and run by people who don't care and think that wrestlers who were dead were actually still alive, which is just insane. Could you be any more of a casual like wrestling viewer than thinking that this guy that wrestled like 40 years ago was still alive? I just like, yeah.
Plus, no disrespect, but like a really heavy guy. Like,
Yeah, wrestlers in general have such a tough time like getting past like 50 or 60.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's this is worst case scenario, man. This was the worst case scenario. It's a gut punch to people who were excited about the direction the company was going in, and it's when when Frankie and I did an episode about Vince coming back and that got announced, I said that, I was very negative the whole episode because I was sad and I was trying to be positive. I don't see any scenario where this ends well. I just don't like
Right.
because things were already going well. I just can't envision this not being the worst thing that could have happened. And I also think that a lot of people I think Triple H is going to be gone. I think a lot of people currently at WWE are probably going to leave. I wanted Triple H to start his own wrestling company anyway, so honestly, I might be okay with that if he left. But yeah, this just this really sucks. I don't know how else to say. I'm trying to get through this whole thing without cursing, but yeah,
I
Vince
guess
Vince McMahon is
fine,
a
yeah, like I think for like um I guess like my final thoughts on this whole thing is just like because as you know and hopefully the viewers know by now, I'm a very very casual wrestling fan. Like for me, it was hard to accept the fact that all of my favorite guys are no longer going to be wrestling, the ones who are still around. Because, I think Rey Mysterio is about to exit soon. And notice there's some updates on Randy's condition, but he's most likely may not come back anytime soon or whatever. But
yeah.
you got to wonder, number one, like I knew from a few things, like Vince McMahon shouldn't have even been like once he had that exit, that should have been it because
Mhm.
he's an idiot. And even y'all would tell me like the storylines were getting much better when Triple H took over. I don't know how this is affecting Triple H's heart because he has that heart problem. I don't know if that's the same kind of, you know, if that'll affect it. But I mean, Triple
Yeah.
H could play a live action Kratos if his heart can handle it because he has the look.
He
So
definitely does
that's where it
actually look like
leads to. Like he
Kratos,
looks
yeah.
just like Kratos, like the
He
beard
really
and that.
does. Do with the
So,
beard, like
like
the current version of Kratos?
yeah, like
Yeah.
I can see that happening if his heart can actually take it. But
Yeah.
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
if his heart can take this, then I think he's probably just immortal because this is pretty devastating. And I we mentioned too a few days ago, like when Triple H took over, it could have gone the other way where like, Frankie and I and a lot of people had wanted that for so long because we saw what he did with NXT and he made it amazing. And we were like, oh my God, give him the whole company, like let him be in charge of creative. And sometimes, you get what you want and it doesn't work out. And there was a scenario where Triple H gets control of the whole company. And then it's like, oh, actually, this is a lot. Like, I'm booking all these shows. I only had to do one, like, NXT used to be a 1 hour show. It's obviously a lot easier to book than a 3 hour weekly episode of
Right.
Raw. But it actually was pretty much going as well as we could have hoped, where he was letting talented wrestlers wrestle and he was booking exciting matches. He brought back War Games, the Survivor Series. Like we were looking forward to the Rumble. And it's really hard. Like, I mean, these sales can take a little while to finalize, i.e., the Activision Xbox sale, which is what
Hmm.
is that, like a year old? It still hasn't been uh official yet. But
Just imagine what's gonna happen with the 2K games because that's probably gonna be gone too.
dude, I really don't know. Like this is if it was an American company or not even American, but just like, like an Amazon, Disney, Netflix, like one of these companies that bought it, I really don't think that much would change. They would just that company would just make money. Like you go to your Netflix subscription and they have a wrestling, they have a WWE section. They're like, "Oh, here's all the pay-per-views from the last 50 years." But
Right.
because it went to Saudi Arabia, which is already just such an unpredictable country, just the way that they do everything. I really don't know, man. The games could be they could also do nothing. I don't think that's gonna happen. I don't think they're gonna keep their hands off. I think they're gonna want to like dig. It's their new toy. It's like they just bought this thing. They'd be like, hell yeah, bring back Goldberg full time. Make him the world heavyweight champion. Oh, that belt's not around anymore. Bring it back. We don't care.
Yeah.
Like John Cena, nah, nah, nah. You're coming back, bro. No more Peacemaker. We're gonna pay you whatever we want. You're coming back. Like I really,
Oh,
it's
that's right.
unpredictable, man.
Because apparently WWE owns the name John Cena. So like, what happens to that? Does that mean they own his name now too? And
Technically, yes, I would think so. I mean, if this deal is for as much money as I think it's going to be, then I
No,
am pretty sure there is nothing Vince McMahon would not sign off on them
he's gonna
owning.
get jumped by like Cena, Reigns, The Rock, Sami Zayn.
Fingers
It was,
crossed, man. We can only hope. I hate Vince McMahon. I think if you needed any further proof that he is rotten to the core, this was it. He did not have to do this. He forced his way back into the company. Board of directors said, "We don't want you back." He said, "Well, that's too bad because I still own the whole company." Put himself back in charge. Then his daughter resigned, and then he sold the company to a country that hates women. So I feel like that sums it up. This sucks. Thanks for listening. Any parting words, Anthony?
Not so much that, we already touched on, but for the viewers, do be sure to check out our Instagram and TikTok. We are actively trying to go back on track, or rather, I am trying to get back on track and get the content uploaded to that. So, new year, so we're gonna get that ball rolling. So, we appreciate you guys watching and listening, and this is just big news. So I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, I wish that this was better news. I wish that the year of wrestling had not started out so insane with this type of news, but here we are. We always knew it could happen, and it's happening. So we'll see you guys in another episode. We'll get all three of us. There will be more information about the sale, hopefully. Hopefully the sale gets blocked by, I don't know, Joe Biden. I'm not really sure like if there's any saving us. I don't know how we get out of this situation. I think Vince is just allowed to sell it to whoever he wants. But we'll get more information as the days roll on, and we'll see you back here for an update. Hopefully all three of us in the next one. Peace out.